silver linens and the soft blush of roses arranged on every table. The air carried laughter, champagne, and the faint music of a string quartet. It was the kind of evening Elena Moore had dreamed of, a perfect celebration for her 32nd birthday and her 5th wedding anniversary. She had planned every detail herself, from the pale gold ribbons to the monogrammed menu cards that read "Forever begins again." She believed, or at least hoped, that this night might heal the quiet distance growing between her and her husband. Guests filled the room, offering polite smiles and murmured admiration. Elena moved through them with practiced grace, her sapphire gown flowing like liquid light. Her friend Grace whispered that she looked stunning, but Elena's eyes kept darting toward the door, waiting for Ryan. He was late again. She told herself it was business, as always. He'd said he'd close a deal and come straight to her. She held onto that hope with trembling hands wrapped around a champagne flute she barely sipped. Minutes turned to an hour. Conversations grew softer, pity beginning to flicker in the eyes of people who pretended not to notice the empty space at the head table. Then, finally, Ryan Moore appeared, tall, polished, and smiling his practiced smile, the one that had once melted her heart. The crowd welcomed him with applause. Relief washed through Elena until she caught the chill in his eyes. He didn't kiss her cheek. He didn't even touch her hand. Instead, he went straight to the microphone at the center of the room. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his tone too formal for a birthday toast. Elena froze beside him, expecting a charming speech to follow. He spoke about change, about growth, about how sometimes two people walk parallel paths until those paths split. At first, no one understood, but as his words sharpened, the meaning became painfully clear. "Tonight," Ryan said, his voice steady as ice, "I want to announce that Elena and I have decided to part ways. Our marriage has reached its end. Irreconcilable differences." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Elena heard the sound before she felt the words slice through her chest. Her fingers loosened, the champagne glass slipping and shattering at her feet. The quartet stopped playing, the world tilted. She wanted to speak, to deny it, but her voice refused to rise. Ryan continued, indifferent to the humiliation burning across her skin. "We remain friends," he added, as if that kindness could erase the cruelty. "And I wish her the best." People stared, unsure whether to clap or remain silent. Flashes from phones began, tiny bursts of light capturing her ruin. Elena turned away, her face pale and unreadable. She could feel pity pressing in from every direction. The birthday candles flickered on a nearby cake that no one dared approach. Without a word, she stepped down from the stage and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking softly against marble. The sound echoed louder than the applause that followed Ryan's announcement. In the garden beyond the ballroom, night air hit her like a slap. She pressed a hand against her chest, struggling to breathe past the humiliation. Tears she had fought all evening finally broke free, tracing black lines of mascara down her cheeks. She didn't notice the man standing in the shadows at first. He had been there all night, near the back of the ballroom, watching quietly. Adrian Blackwell, hotel owner, investor, a man known for power and restraint. But in that moment, he wasn't a businessman. He was simply someone who had seen too much heartbreak to look away from another's. He approached slowly, his steps measured, his gaze steady. Without speaking, he extended a folded handkerchief, white silk embroidered with an initial she couldn't read through her tears. "You don't have to hide it," he said softly. "Pain isn't weakness. It's proof you still care." Elena hesitated before taking it, her fingers brushing his. His voice was calm, deep, carrying warmth that contrasted with the cold cruelty she had just endured. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," he added. "But sometimes endings are just mercy disguised as heartbreak." She wanted to ask who he was, but her throat ached too much to form words. She only nodded, clutching the handkerchief as if it were an anchor. He studied her a moment longer, this fragile woman who had just been broken in public, yet somehow still stood tall. From inside, laughter resumed faintly as Ryan began charming the crowd again. Adrian's jaw tightened, his eyes dark with restrained fury. "You deserve better than his stage," he said quietly. "Tomorrow morning, meet me here. I have an idea that might help you rebuild what he tried to take." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Elena alone under the starlit garden. Somewhere inside, the candles on her birthday cake burned out one by one, their smoke curling like whispers of everything she had just lost. The morning light spilled through the tall glass windows of the hotel lobby, painting soft gold over marble floors and quiet corners. Elena sat at a table by the window, her untouched coffee growing cold. She had not slept much. Her mind replayed every word Ryan had said, every whisper, every camera flash. She still could not understand how a man she had loved for years could turn her birthday into a stage for betrayal. She almost left before the clock reached 9. She almost ran again until a calm voice behind her said, "I was beginning to think you would not come." She turned, and there he was. Adrian Blackwell, the stranger from the garden, though now under daylight. He did not look like a stranger at all. His dark hair framed a face that carried strength and something else, compassion. His suit was simple, but his presence filled the space around him. He gestured to the chair opposite her. "May I?" She nodded, unable to find her voice. "You look like someone who spent the night fighting ghosts," he said quietly. She gave a small laugh, more broken than amused. "I lost that fight long before last night I saw what happened." Adrian continued, his tone gentle but firm. "The world can be cruel when it senses vulnerability. I wanted to speak sooner, but that was your moment, not mine. You should not have had to endure that in public." She looked at him suspiciously. "Why do you care? You don't even know me." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he reached into his jacket and placed a folded newspaper on the table. Her name was on the front page beneath a photo taken the night before. The headline read, "Investor Ryan Moore announces divorce during birthday gala." Wife shocked in silence beneath it. The photograph caught her mid-turn, eyes wide, mouth half open, heartbreak captured forever. Adrian's expression hardened. "When I see injustice, I don't stand by," he said firmly. "And because that hotel, the one where your celebration took place, belongs to me." Her breath caught off guard by the revelation. "The garden where you cried, the ballroom where he humiliated you, they are mine. And so for a reason I cannot quite explain, I feel responsible for the pain that happened under my roof. I'm not here out of pity, Elena. I'm here because you deserve a chance to build something that belongs only to you." She frowned. "What are you offering?" Adrian leaned forward. "I have a project, a new chain of boutique hotels, each designed to tell a story of renewal. I need someone who understands emotion, not just architecture. I saw your work on the Riverside exhibition. The use of light and space was extraordinary. You have vision and courage even if you've forgotten it." She stared at him, disbelief warring with exit. "Hastian, are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a beginning," he replied, "and perhaps a way to turn your pain into something no one can ever use against you again." His words sank deep into her chest, but fear quickly followed. "What if I fail?" she whispered. "Then you fail. Trying for yourself, not for someone else," he said softly. "That's a victory in itself." Before she could respond, a voice echoed across the lobby, sharp and unwelcome. "Ryan." His presence instantly pulled the air from the room. He wore the same calm mask as the night before, flanked by 2 associates, as if he were arriving for a business meeting. Elena stood frozen as he approached, his eyes flicking to Adrian with thinly veiled contempt. "Well, this is awkward," he said. "I see you've already moved on." Adrian rose slowly, his height forcing Ryan to tilt his head slightly when he spoke. His tone was ice-laced with quiet authority. "Mr. Moore, your presence is not welcome here. This is my hotel. Your scene last night was enough." Ryan smirked. "Ownership does not equal control. Not everything bends to money." Adrian's expression didn't change. "Perhaps not everything, but certain behaviors have consequences." He glanced toward the front desk, and within seconds, security appeared politely but firmly, guiding Ryan back toward the exit. Ryan's parting words were low but full of venom. "Enjoy the charity case, Blackwell. She ruins everything she touches." Adrian waited until the doors closed before turning back to Elena. She looked shaken, but her eyes burned with something new, not shame, but resolve. He reached for her hand, briefly steadying her. "You don't have to decide today," he said quietly. "Think about it." She nodded, unable to speak as he walked away. She watched him disappear through the revolving doors, his silhouette framed by sunlight. For the first time since last night, she felt the faint stir of something she thought was gone. Hope somewhere behind her, the broken pieces of her birthday began to fade, replaced by a whisper of possibility and the echo of his words when he first found her. "You're allowed to start again, Ray." In swept across the city that evening, turning the streets into mirrors of silver and shadow. Elena stood beneath the glass canopy of Adrian's office tower, her hands trembling as she pressed the elevator button. She had spent the entire day debating whether to come. The job offer had felt impossible, almost unreal. Yet something inside her refused to ignore it. She wanted to rebuild, not for revenge, not to prove Ryan wrong, but to find the part of herself that had disappeared years ago. The elevator doors opened, revealing Adrian standing inside, waiting as if he knew she would come. His dark gray suit was slightly unbuttoned, his tie loosened his expression, calm, but his eyes sharp with quiet anticipation. "I hoped you would accept my invitation," he said, stepping aside to let her enter. She hesitated only a moment before joining him. The elevator ascended smoothly, and for a few seconds they stood in silence, the faint hum of the cables echoing like a heartbeat between them. When the doors opened, the top floor unfolded like a world above. Clouds. Wide windows revealed a skyline shimmering through the rain. Architectural models covered long tables illuminated by soft amber light. Each model was a story in progress. "The Horizon Project," he said, gesturing around the room, a vision of renewal built from sustainable materials and designed to heal urban decay. "I want to build spaces that make people feel safe again. I believe you can help me do that." His voice held no flattery, only belief, and that disarmed her more than any compliment could. She stepped closer, examining the design, her fingers grazing the delicate miniature beams. "You want me to design the interiors?" she asked. "Not just that," he replied. "I want you to design how people feel when they walk inside. I want warmth after cold, hope after silence. You understand emotion better than any designer I've met." Her throat tightened. "Why me?" Adrian smiled slightly. "Because you survived what others would not, and survival teaches balance." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the glass wall. His assistant entered with a folder. "Sir, we have a problem," she said quickly. "The bid documents for the Horizon Project were leaked to a rival company." Adrian's calm demeanor shifted, his eyes narrowed. "How is that possible?" She hesitated. "Someone inside sent them anonymously, and there's a name attached. Ryan Moore." The air in the room turned heavy. Elena's heart pounded. "Ryan," she whispered. Adrian glanced at her. "You didn't tell me he was connected to the design industry." "He wasn't," she said, voice shaking. "But after last night, maybe he's trying to hurt me through you." Adrian closed the folder, his jaw tightening. "Tell me everything you know about him." She told him about the debts, the lies, the charm that masked cruelty. She spoke until her voice cracked, and he listened without interruption. When she finished, he said quietly, "You're not responsible for his actions, but if he's trying to destroy this project, then he's chosen the wrong opponent." He moved toward the window, watching the storm outside, his reflection flickering in the glass. "I've faced worse than men like him, but I won't let him harm what you're building now." Lightning flashed, illuminating his face. Determination etched in every line. He turned back to her. "I want you to stay on this project, Elena. No matter what he tries to do, I'll handle the rest." She took a step back. "I don't want you fighting my battles." Adrian shook his head. "This isn't your battle anymore. It's ours." For a moment, they simply stood there, rain tapping against the glass, thunder rumbling far below. She felt the strange pull between them, a current neither could ignore. But before she could respond, his phone vibrated. He checked the screen, and his expression darkened. He showed her the message, an email forwarded from an unknown source containing photographs of her taken secretly in the past weeks, one of them from the "A Night in the Garden," tears on her face, Ryan's name in the message header. Her stomach dropped. "He's watching me." Adrian's voice lowered, cold and controlled. "He's crossed a line. I'll make sure he regrets it." "No," she said quickly, fear cutting through her voice. "That's what he wants, to provoke a scandal to make us react publicly. He wants control." Adrian studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right. Control only works if we give it to him." The storm outside intensified, rain sliding down the glass like falling stars. He moved closer, his voice softer now. "You've spent too long reacting to cruelty. It's time to start creating your own direction." She looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time without flinching. "And what if I lose myself again? Then I'll find you," he said simply. "Because I think you've already found something worth protecting." She didn't answer, but her eyes glistened as the thunder rolled through the night, carrying with it the beginning of something powerful and unknown. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows of Adrian's penthouse office, touching the edges of blueprints spread across the long oak table. Elena stood beside him, her hair tied loosely, her hands tracing the design that would become the center of the horizon. Project. A hotel meant to represent rebirth. She could see the vision unfolding in her mind, calm spaces with light streaming through curved walls, gardens on rooftops that whispered serenity in the middle of chaos. Adrian watched her as she spoke about color balance and human emotion. There was something magnetic in the way she spoke, not just technical but personal, as if every line drawn carried a piece of her healing. She pointed to the sketches. This section here, it should be open, transparent, like life after the storm. Adrian nodded, approval sparking quietly in his eyes. Their peaceful focus broke when his assistant burst into the room breathless. Her expression pale, sir. The finance board just received a complaint against the Horizon Project, anonymous again but serious. She handed over a letter sealed in red. Adrian unfolded it, reading quickly, his eyes darkening. It accuses you of design theft. Elena, her heart lurched. What? That's impossible. He handed her the letter. Someone claims your design for the atrium copies a luxury resort built 2 years ago in Bali. The signature at the bottom made her blood run cold. Ryan Moore, for a long moment she couldn't speak. It was the same strategy he used in business. Fabricate chaos, destroy reputations. She looked up at Adrian, tears of frustration rising. This will ruin everything if people believe it. Adrian's tone was firm. They won't. He picked up his phone. I'll call my legal team. We'll prove your work is original. She stopped him. Don't you see this isn't just about business? He wants to destroy us both. The room fell silent, the soft hum of the city. The only sound, he approached her slowly, his eyes steady. If he wants a war, he'll get one, but we'll fight it on our terms, not his. Later that day, they visited the construction site. Tall cranes stretched into the clouds, metal bones of the future hotel gleaming under sunlight. The workers greeted Adrian respectfully while Elena walked through the skeleton of the building, imagining what it would one day become as she moved among the steel beams. She felt an odd sensation, a flicker of movement from the corner of her eye. She turned quickly. Nothing, just a fluttering tarp maybe, or the wind. But her heart raced anyway. Adrian noticed. You're pale. Are you all right? I thought I saw someone watching us, she murmured. Probably security, he said, but his tone carried unease. That night, after she returned home, she found an envelope slipped beneath her apartment door. No name, no address inside. It was a single photograph of her and Adrian taken from afar during the site visit, the words written across it in uneven ink. You're repeating your mistakes again. Her hands shook, the memory of Ryan's cruelty pressing against her mind. She called Adrian immediately. He answered on the first ring, his voice low. Where are you at home? Stay there. I'm coming. No, she began, but the line went dead. 15 minutes later, a black car pulled up in front of her building. Adrian stepped out. His face tense, he took the photo from her hand and studied it carefully, his jaw tightening. This isn't just surveillance, he said. This is a message. You think it's him? She whispered. I'm certain of it. He's testing boundaries, seeing how far he can go before you break again. She sank onto the couch, trembling. I can't go through this again. Adrian knelt in front of her, his voice soft but full of fire. Yes, you can, because you're not alone this time. He took out a small box from his coat and placed it on the table. Inside was a silver compass, the same design etched with initials that weren't his, when I lost my fiancé in the hotel collapse years ago. I stopped trusting direction. This compass belonged to her. It's always pointed to north. No matter how lost I became, he looked at her with intensity. I'm giving it to you now, not as a symbol of rescue, but of faith. Faith that you'll find your way out of this storm. Tears slipped down her face. She reached out and closed the box, her fingers brushing his. His eyes softened when she spoke. Her voice shook, but held quiet strength. Then I'll use it, she said, not to escape, but to find where I belong again. Thunder rolled outside as rain began to fall. He stood and drew the curtains open, letting lightning flash through the glass horizon before us, he said softly. And behind us, the storm. You decide which way you'll walk. She looked at him, her reflection merging with his in the window, and whispered maybe. This time I'll walk through it, he smiled, a rare, unguarded smile, the kind that made the air hum with promise. Maybe this time we'll walk together. The storm that had rumbled through the night left the city washed clean by morning. Soft mist clung to the skyline as Elena stood in Adrian's office holding the compass he had given her. It felt heavier than metal, a reminder of faith, trust, and danger, all tangled together. She could not stop thinking about the photograph slipped under her door, or the words written across it. "You're repeating your mistakes again." Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ryan's smirk and heard his voice whispering that she would never escape him. Adrian entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee, his sleeves rolled up and his tie loosened. He looked both exhausted and determined. His security team traced the source of the envelope, he said quietly. "It came from a private post office 2 blocks from your apartment, the same one Ryan's company used years ago." Her breath caught. "You're certain his eyes met hers?" "I don't deal in guesses." She set the compass on the table. "If he wants to scare me, he's winning." Adrian stepped closer. "Not winning, just trying." He reached out and touched her wrist gently, his voice steady and calm. "Fear only works when you face it alone. You're not alone anymore. Remember that." Their eyes locked for a long moment before his phone rang, breaking the silence. He answered, listened for a few seconds, then his expression changed. He ended the call and turned to her. "The city zoning board just froze. Our construction permits. Someone filed a complaint claiming safety violations." "That's impossible," she said. "We just passed inspection yesterday." He nodded. "Which means someone paid to fabricate evidence." Ryan's name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't have to be. Anger and helplessness twisted inside her. She walked to the window. "The Horizon project was supposed to be about healing," she whispered. "Now it feels like a battlefield." Adrian joined her at the window, the reflection of their faces merging in the glass. Then, "Let's fight smarter, not louder." Hours later, they met Grace at the design studio to review documents. Grace had been her friend for years, a woman of fierce loyalty and quiet wisdom. She studied the reports carefully. "There's a pattern here," she said, tapping the papers. "The anonymous tips, the fake photos, the legal filings. They're all timed to follow every milestone you reach. Whoever is behind this wants emotional damage, not financial loss. They want to crush your momentum." Adrian's gaze darkened, which means he knows exactly where to strike. By afternoon, they were at the construction site again. The sound of machinery echoed across the steel frames. Workers halted as inspectors arrived, clipboards in hand. One of them approached Adrian, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Blackwell." "We received reports of structural tampering," he said. Adrian's tone remained polite but sharp. "Those reports are false, but feel free to check every beam, every measurement." Elena stood nearby, trying to remain composed, but the unease in her stomach grew. She noticed a man standing near the gate, his posture too still, his gaze fixed on her, the same man she had glimpsed before in the shadows of the site. He turned away quickly, disappearing behind a truck. She whispered to Adrian, "Someone's here watching again." He followed her line of sight, but the man was gone. That night, Adrian insisted she stay at his penthouse for safety. She hesitated, but exhaustion overcame pride. His home was modern yet warm, full of soft lighting and quiet spaces. He showed her to the guest room, but before leaving, he said, "If you need anything, my door is across the hall." She nodded, thanking him, but as the night deepened, she found herself unable to sleep. The city lights flickered through the curtains. Every sound made her tense. Sometime after midnight, a faint beep echoed from the living room. She rose quietly, following it to the large glass doors that led to the balcony. On the small table outside lay her phone screen, glowing with a new message. "Unknown number." The words sent chills down her spine. "Nice view. Shame. It's not yours." Adrian appeared behind her within seconds, his presence sudden but steady. He read the message over her shoulder. His jaw clenched without a word. He took her phone, typed something quickly, then handed it back. "I sent it to my tech team," he said calmly. "They'll trace the signal and they will find him." She looked at him, his control both reassuring and frightening. "What if this never stops?" she asked, voice trembling. "What if he never lets go?" Adrian turned to her, his expression softening. "It will stop when you stop running from the ghosts," he said quietly. "And when he realizes he can't touch what you've built inside yourself anymore, you've already beaten him. You just don't see it yet." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe in the safety of his words. The night air was cold, but his hand found hers, warm, steady, grounding in a world that had started to spin too fast. Outside, the storm clouds were gathering again, but somewhere deep within, Elena felt something shift, a spark of strength lighting in the darkness as she whispered, "I'm tired of being afraid." Adrian's answer came like a promise. "Then let's end this fear together." The night stretched long and sleepless. Thunder rolled over the city as if echoing the turmoil that churned inside Elena. By morning, she sat on the balcony of Adrian's penthouse, watching rain hit the glass, her fingers wrapped around the compass he had given her. The needle trembled slightly with every gust of wind. She whispered to herself, I will not be broken again. The words felt fragile but real. Inside, Adrian paced across the living room phone pressed to his ear, his tone sharp and precise. His tech team had traced the message from her phone. It came from a signal that moved constantly, never lingering long enough to locate. But the sender had made one mistake. He had connected once through an office server belonging to More Investments. Ryan. Her chest tightened when Adrian ended the call. His eyes were dark with restrained fury. He knows we're closing in, Adrian said quietly. This won't end with warnings anymore. He's escalating. Elena stood slowly, fear curling at the edge of her voice, escalating how Adrian hesitated before answering. Last night, someone tried to breach the construction site. They cut the security wires and damaged part of the foundation. No one was hurt, but it was deliberate. She covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. The project, the one that was supposed to heal, she whispered. It's turning into a war zone. Adrian stepped closer. This isn't about the project anymore. This is about control. He wants to see if he can still make you fall apart. He reached for her hand, his voice lower, calmer, but steel beneath the warmth. I won't let him win, not through fear, not through destruction, but you have to trust me completely now. She looked up through her tears. Trust you with what? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned and unlocked a drawer, pulling out a slim black folder. Inside were photographs, documents, emails, all traced back to Ryan. Every lie, every manipulation, every fake report. Adrian had been building a case, quietly waiting for the moment to strike, legally, strategically. She stared at the evidence, trembling. This could ruin him. Yes, Adrian said softly. But we do it cleanly. No public drama, no chaos. We expose him through the truth, not revenge. That's what separates us from him. She nodded, feeling the first flicker of strength return. Later that afternoon, they went together to the Horizon site. The rain had stopped, but the sky was heavy and gray. Workers greeted them cautiously, their fear still lingering after the break-in as they walked through the skeletal structure. Adrian kept close, his gaze scanning every shadow. Elena noticed a faint light flicker in one of the upper floors. A reflection from a camera lens, she whispered. Adrian, we're being... G watched. He looked up quickly, catching the glint just before it vanished. He signaled security immediately, but whoever it was disappeared into the maze of unfinished corridors. Hours later, as evening fell, they returned to the car, silence thick between them. Elena stared out the window, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. Finally, she spoke softly. He'll never stop, will he? Adrian's eyes stayed on the road. He will when he realizes the woman he's chasing no longer exists. At home, she tried to rest, but her dreams turned restless. She saw flashes of the ballroom, the humiliation, the camera flashes, the sound of her name being whispered like gossip. She woke with a start, heart racing. She went to the kitchen to drink water, but stopped cold when she saw a shadow move near the glass door that opened to the balcony. Her pulse thundered. She stepped closer and saw a folded piece of paper pressed against the glass from the outside. She opened the door with shaking hands, rain blowing in the note, wet but still legible. It read, If you don't leave him, something worse than embarrassment is coming. Her scream brought Adrian running. He grabbed the note, scanning it quickly, his jaw tightening. Stay here, he said, grabbing his coat. I'm calling security. She caught his arm. Don't go alone, please. Adrian looked at her eyes filled with fear, but also something deeper, a plea for him to stay. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. All right, we stay together. Minutes later, the power cut out, plunging the penthouse into darkness. Thunder cracked outside, lightning illuminated the room for a split second, revealing a silhouette standing on the balcony, before disappearing. Adrian moved swiftly, pulling Elena behind him, his phone light slicing through the dark. But the balcony was empty, just the open door, rain and the fluttering curtains. Security arrived moments later, confirming no one had entered, but a single black glove lay near the railing left behind. Deliberately, Adrian turned it over in his hand, his expression unreadable. This isn't intimidation anymore, he said. This is obsession, Elay. Na stood shaking but defiant. He wants me to live afraid, she whispered. Then I won't give him that anymore. Adrian looked at her. Then something changed in his eyes, a mix of pride and fierce protectiveness. He took her hand and said quietly, Tomorrow, we turn the game around. We stop reacting and start leading. She stared at him, uncertain what he meant, but the calm determination in his voice steadied her heart as dawn began to break and the city lights dimmed. The compass on the table quivered once more, its needle finding north, and for the first time since her world had collapsed, Elena felt like she knew which direction she would follow hours later as evening fell. They returned to the car, silence thick between them. Elena stared out the window, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. Finally, she spoke softly. "He'll never stop, will he?" Adrian's eyes stayed on the road. He will when he realizes the woman he's chasing no longer exists. At home, she tried to rest, but her dreams turned restless. She saw flashes of the ballroom, the humiliation, the camera flashes, the sound of her name being whispered like gossip. She woke with a start, heart racing. She went to the kitchen to drink water but stopped cold when she saw a shadow move near the glass door that opened to the balcony. Her pulse thundered. She stepped closer and saw a folded piece of paper pressed against the glass from the outside. She opened the door with shaking hands, rain blowing in the note, wet but still legible. It read, "If you don't leave him, something worse than embarrassment is coming." Her scream brought Adrian running. He grabbed the note, scanning it quickly, his jaw tightening. "Stay here," he said, grabbing his coat. "I'm calling security." She caught his arm. "Don't go alone, please." Adrian looked at her eyes filled with fear, but also something deeper, a plea for him to stay. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "All right, we stay too." Together. Minutes later, the power cut out, plunging the penthouse into darkness. Thunder cracked outside, lightning illuminated the room. For a split second, revealing a silhouette standing on the balcony before disappearing. Adrian moved swiftly, pulling Elena behind him, his phone light slicing through the dark, but the balcony was empty. Just the open door, rain, and the fluttering curtains. Security arrived moments later, confirming no one had entered, but a single black glove lay near the railing left behind. Deliberately, Adrian turned it over in his hand, his expression unreadable. "This isn't intimidation anymore," he said. "This is obsession." Elena stood shaking but defiant. "He wants me to live afraid," she whispered. "Then I won't give him that anymore." Adrian looked at her. Then something changed in his eyes, a mix of pride and fierce protectiveness. He took her hand and said quietly, "Tomorrow, we turn the game around. We stop reacting and start leading." She stared at him, uncertain what he meant, but the calm determination in his voice steadied her heart. As dawn began to break and the city lights dimmed, the compass on the table quivered once more, its needle finding north. And for the first time since her world had collapsed, Elena felt like she knew which direction she would follow. The morning came with a heavy silence. Clouds hung low over the city like they too carried secrets. Elena sat at the edge of Adrian's desk, watching him pace across the room. Papers scattered, blueprints glowing under the soft light of dawn. He was planning something different, sharper and more deliberate than before. The man who once spoke in calm reason now carried a quiet storm beneath his skin. He finally stopped and looked at her, his eyes steady. "We're not waiting for his next move anymore. We create our own," he said, his voice controlled but full of purpose. She frowned. "What do you mean?" He slid a file across the desk. "Ryan is holding secret accounts under another name. His empire isn't as stable as it looks. My team found evidence of fraudulent partnerships. With one of his investors, we leak this at the right time and his credibility collapses." She hesitated. "This feels dangerous." Adrian stepped closer. "Sometimes the only way to end a monster's game is to take away the board." He paused, studying her face. "If we do this, there's no going back. He'll come after us, harder than before." She met his gaze, unwavering. "He already has." By afternoon, they were at the Horizon site again, the structure now towering over the skyline, the sound of machines echoing like distant thunder. Adrian walked beside her, giving final instructions to the engineers, while Elena oversaw the interior framework. She was beginning to feel alive again, creating beauty out of steel and glass. But the piece was short-lived. A worker approached nervously, handing Adrian a phone. "Sir, someone from the Finance Bureau wants to speak with you." He took the call and listened, his face unreadable until the last few seconds. When his expression turned to steel, he ended the call quietly, turning to Elena. "They've frozen all our project accounts." Her eyes widened. "What? That's impossible." "The official reason," he said softly. "Money laundering accusations under your name?" Elena's knees almost buckled. "What, my name?" He nodded. "Ryan's doing, without a doubt. He used one of his shell companies to wire fake transfers to your account yesterday morning. The system flagged it automatically. Fear gave way to anger. She gripped the edge of the desk in his mobile command trailer. "He's trying to make me look corrupt. He wants everyone to see me as what he always said, I was a liability." Adrian cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me," he whispered. "You are not what he says you are. He's desperate now, which means he's losing, but we have to stay 2 steps ahead." Later that night, the city lights burned below them as they sat in the penthouse surrounded by files and computer screens. Grace joined them, having flown on. And to help, she studied the data, closely confirming Adrian's suspicion. "It's a smear campaign, timed to coincide with the grand opening." She looked at Elena, then at Adrian. "If we expose his fake accounts now, it could clear her, but it will also destroy his company completely." Adrian's tone was quiet. "Good, that's the point." Hours passed as they built a digital trail tracing every illegal transaction, each line of code connecting back to Ryan's private servers, somewhere between exhaustion and adrenaline. Elena felt the world tilt. She had spent years shrinking under his control. Now she was dismantling his empire, one truth at a time. Adrian glanced up from his laptop and caught the faint smile on her lips. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She looked at him. "I'm thinking that power isn't loud. It's calm. It's knowing when to strike." Before dawn, they sent the encrypted files to a journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. The message simple. Everything you need to uncover the truth. No names, no signatures. But as the first light crept over the horizon, Elena's phone buzzed, a video link from an unknown number. Her blood ran cold when she clicked play. It showed footage from the night of her birthday, the moment Ryan announced their divorce. The camera angle was new, shot from behind the stage, capturing her collapse, her tears, her humiliation. Ryan's voice whispered over the recording. "You can build all the towers you want, Elena, but everyone will still remember how easily I broke you." She dropped the phone, trembling. Adrian caught it, reading the message beneath the video. It said 2 words, "Final warning." He looked up, his voice low and dangerous. "He's losing control, which makes him unpredictable. He's cornered now. And that's when people like him are most dangerous." The following evening, Adrian arranged a private dinner at the top floor of the nearly finished Horizon Tower, a celebration for their team and investors to maintain the illusion that everything was normal, but beneath the surface, it was a battlefield waiting to erupt as guests arrive. Champagne flowed and cameras flashed. The air hummed with tension. Elena wore black instead of her usual soft colors, her eyes sharp, her expression calm. She was done being the broken woman in his story tonight. She would write her own. Midway through the evening, Adrian received a call from his security chief. His jaw tightened. He whispered to her. "He's here." Elena turned slowly toward the elevator doors, which had just opened, and there he stood. Ryan Moore, dressed in arrogance and expensive silk, smiling like the villain who thought the world still belonged to him. He walked toward them slowly, guests turning to watch, whispers rising in the crowd. Adrian stepped in front of Elena, blocking his path, but Ryan only laughed. "Relax. Blackwell, I'm not here for a fight. I'm here for closure." He turned his eyes on Elena, full of poison. "Happy anniversary," he said softly. She met his stare without flinching. The silence between them, electric and dangerous. Adrian's voice was calm but carried warning. "Leave now before you regret it." Ryan smiled wider. "Oh, I'm not leaving. Not until I see what happens when your empire burns with hers." Security began to close in, but Ryan raised a small remote, pressing a button. Suddenly, the massive screens across the hall flickered to life, showing images of her design plans, documents, photographs, hacked from their computers. He shouted to the crowd, "The great Elena Moore, the innocent designer who steals ideas from others." Chaos erupted, but before panic could spread, Adrian took the microphone, his tone cool and unshaken. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to clarify." He gestured to one of his technicians, who switched the screen again, this time displaying files and dates, proving every design was registered under Elena's name, months before Ryan's accusations. The crowd hushed as Adrian's voice deepened. "The only thief here tonight is the man who cannot stand the sight of a woman he could control." Ryan's face drained of color as whispers turned against him. Cameras flashed. Security moved forward and the investors began leaving in silence. Elena stood watching the man who once held her world crumble before her eyes. She didn't smile, she didn't gloat. She simply turned to Adrian and said quietly, "It's over." He looked at her, the storm outside reflecting in his eyes. "Not yet," he whispered softly. "But it will be soon, and when it ends, it will end with truth, not hate." Outside, lightning split the sky, the Horizon Tower glowing like a promise between them. A promise that justice was close and redemption was only a heartbeat away. Rain returned to the city the next morning, falling steady against the glass walls of the Horizon Tower. The news channels were already alive with chaos. Footage of the gala replayed again and again. Ryan Moore humiliated in public, Adrian Blackwell defending the woman he loved. The world had chosen its sides, but Elena knew this was not victory. Not yet. It was only the calm before the last storm. She stood by the window watching reporters gathered below umbrellas open like black wings. Adrian approached from behind his reflection, appearing beside hers on the glass. "He's not finished," he said quietly. "The journalist we gave the files to is being threatened. They've received anonymous warnings to bury the story or face legal ruin." She turned to face him. "Then we release it ourselves. No intermediaries, full exposure." Adrian hesitated. "That means we'll become targets. He'll come after us, harder than ever." She lifted her chin. "I'm done hiding." Hours later, they met with Grace in a small studio downtown, the three of them huddled around laptops, screens filled with documents, bank records, voice recordings, all connected to Ryan's illegal dealings. Adrian's team had uncovered enough to shatter his empire in one strike. Grace glanced at them both once. "This goes live, there's no undoing it. He'll be finished, but you'll both be dragged through the fire too." Adrian's gaze met Elena's calm and steady. Then we walk through it together, as Grace uploaded the files to the global media network. A strange silence filled the room, the kind of silence that comes before thunder. Within minutes, the first headline appeared. Breaking news. Corporate fraud investigation exposes more investments within an hour. The story went viral across the city and beyond. By evening, the city lights flickered with news alerts. Ryan's offices swarmed with investigators. His employees questioned his accounts frozen for the first time in years. His voice was not the one controlling the narrative, and that loss drove him toward madness. That night, as Adrian and Elena drove back toward the tower, his phone vibrated a message. Unknown number, a single sentence. "You've taken everything from me. Now, I'll take her." Adrian's knuckles tightened on the steering wheel, his voice low. "We're not going home tonight." He turned sharply onto a different road, heading toward his private estate outside the city, surrounded by forest and high walls. The car sped through the rain while Elena sat frozen, the words replaying in her mind. When they arrived, Adrian's security detail met them immediately, reinforcing the gates and securing the perimeter. Still, the unease lingered. Every shadow outside seemed alive, every sound sharper than before. She stayed close to him as he led her inside the warmth of the house, contrasting the storm outside. Later, she sat near the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, Adrian beside her, going through calls from his team, each report worse than the last. Ryan had disappeared from the city, his penthouse abandoned, his offices locked down, no trace of him anywhere. "He's planning something," Adrian muttered. "He's too quiet now." Elena looked up at him, fear whispering through her voice. "What if he's watching us right now?" Adrian took her hand. "Not fear," he said. "Focus." Hours passed until fatigue finally pulled her toward helplessly. She dreamt of the ballroom again, the flashing lights, the humiliation. But this time when she turned from the stage, Adrian was there holding out his hand, whispering, "You're not alone anymore." She woke with tears on her cheeks, the soft sound of footsteps drawing her attention. Adrian stood by the window, his phone pressed to his ear, listening in silence before turning to her. "He's surfaced," he said softly, his tone unreadable. "One of my sources spotted him near the old pier, the place where my fiancé died." The air in the room thickened. "You think he's trying to draw you out?" "No," Adrian replied. "He's trying to finish the story where it began." An hour later, they reached the pier, the sea rough and wild wind tearing at their clothes, lights from the car cutting through the darkness. Ryan stood at the edge, his silhouette sharp against the crashing waves. When Adrian called his name, he turned smiling like a ghost. "You took my world from me," he shouted above the wind. "Now I'll take yours." He pulled a gun from his coat, pointing it toward Adrian. Elena's scream tore through the night, but before Ryan could fire, Adrian stepped forward, his voice calm. "This isn't power, Ryan. This is desperation. You already lost." For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then a shot rang out, echoing against the waves. But it wasn't Adrian who fell. Ryan staggered backward, eyes wide, the gun slipping from his hand. Security agents rushed in from the shadows. The shot had come from one of Adrian's guards, carefully watching from a distance. Ryan hit the ground, the fury draining from his face replaced by hollow defeat. Sirens wailed in the distance as police lights painted the night blue. Elena knelt beside Adrian, her hands trembling. He looked at her, his eyes filled not with triumph but sorrow. "It's over," he whispered. She looked at Ryan being taken away, blood mixing with the rain, and felt no joy, only relief mixed with grief. It was finally done. The next morning, headlines flooded every screen. Moore arrested on multiple charges. Blackwell's Horizon project cleared of all allegati. Bones. Elena read them quietly, her heart both heavy and free. Adrian entered the room, placing the compass beside her, the needle steady at north. "You kept your direction," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "Maybe because you reminded me where to look, for the first time since that terrible birthday." She felt something she had forgotten. Peace, as Adrian drew her close. The world outside faded, leaving only the sound of the rain and the heartbeat of two souls who had walked through the storm and found their horizon. At last, the weeks that followed were a blur of flashing headlines and court hearings. Ryan Moore's empire collapsed under the weight of his own corruption. The world called it poetic justice, but for Elena, it felt more like the closing of a wound that had never properly healed yet. Deep inside, she knew something still lingered. Not everything was finished, not everything was safe. Adrian's world had changed too. The media painted him as the billionaire who fought for truth, but he ignored the spotlight, focusing only on rebuilding what had been damaged. The Horizon Tower neared completion, standing tall and gleaming over the city like a promise, reborn. Elena spent her days finalizing the final design touches, yet at night sleep rarely came, her mind haunted by shadows she couldn't name. Every sound in the dark made her heart race, every ringing phone made her stomach twist. One evening, as she walked through the almost finished tower, she paused near the main atrium. The vast glass ceiling reflected her face bathed in silver moonlight, and for a moment she thought she saw movement on the upper level, a flicker, a shape she couldn't quite place. She called out softly, but no one answered. Stillness returned, but her pulse didn't calm. She told herself it was exhaustion, but the feeling stayed like a whisper at the back of her mind. The next day, Adrian noticed her distraction over lunch. He reached a crow. "The table," his tone gentle. "You've been distant lately." She hesitated, then told him about the movement she had seen, about the unease that wouldn't leave him. He listened quietly, his brow furrowing. "I'll increase the security," he said, but his expression carried something else, something that looked like guilt. That night she woke to find him standing by the window again, phone in hand, speaking softly into the darkness. When she whispered his name, he ended the call too quickly. She asked who it was, but he just said business. Nothing important yet. His eyes avoided hers for the first time since they met. A small, cold space opened inside her. The following morning, Grace came to her office, pale and shaken. She closed the door, locking it behind her. "Elena, there's something you need to see," she whispered. She handed over a printed document, an email trail between Ryan's former accountant and an anonymous investor. Someone had secretly bought controlling shares in one of Adrian's development subsidiaries right before Ryan's arrest. Elena frowned. "What does that mean?" Grace's voice trembled. "It means someone close to Adrian helped fund the exposure that took Ryan down. Whoever it was profited from the chaos." She stared at Grace, confused and frightened. "Are you saying Adrian set Ryan up?" Grace hesitated. "I'm saying someone might have used you both as pawns." Elena felt her heart pound in her chest, the world tilting again. She took the papers and left without a word, driving to Adrian's penthouse, rain slashing against the windshield as memories of their journey flashed before her. The trust, the tenderness, the way he had saved her every time she fell. Could it have all been built on something darker? When she arrived, the lights were low. Adrian sat at his desk, the compass she cherished lying beside his hand. He looked up when she entered, his face unreadable. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. "I saw the emails." He closed his eyes for a brief second, then opened them again, calm but tired. "I was going to tell you," he said softly. She stepped back. "Key, the room spinning." "Tell me what?" "Adrian, please tell me I'm wrong." He stood slowly walking toward her. "Yes, I helped expose Ryan, but not because of greed, because of what he did to you. I needed proof. I needed the world to see what kind of man he truly was." "You used me," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "You let me think this was about justice, but it was revenge." Adrian's voice broke. "It started as revenge. But then I met you, and it became something else, I swear it did. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating their faces, both broken, both trapped in truth. He reached for her, but she pulled away. I trusted you, she said through tears. I trusted you more than anyone. He lowered his voice. I love you, Elena. Everything I did was to protect you. But she shook her head. Protection built on lies is still control. She turned toward the door, but his next words froze her. There's something else you don't know. He walked to his desk, opening a drawer and pulling out an envelope. It was sealed with a red wax emblem she recognized from her late mother's estate. What is that? She whispered. Your mother's property. The one you sold for Julian's watch, he said softly. It was never destroyed. I bought it under a trust years ago before I even knew you. Her knees nearly gave way. You what? Why? Because I knew one day you'd need a piece of yourself untouched by pain. The silence that followed felt like time itself had stopped. Outside the storm raged, but inside everything was still. She looked at him, her anger mixing with disbelief and a flicker of gratitude. You did all this and still lied to me, she said, her voice breaking. He stepped forward. I lied to protect what mattered. I lied to keep you safe, not to own you, but because I couldn't lose you. Tears streamed down her face. She didn't know if she hated him or loved him more for it. She turned away, unable to look at him, her hand pressed over the compass at her throat, the needle, trembling as though it too couldn't find north anymore. Behind her, Adrian's voice was soft, almost a whisper. I'll spend the rest of my life proving that this love was never built on revenge. As she walked out into the storm, the city lights blurred through her tears. Somewhere far below, thunder rolled, and the horizon tower gleamed against the rain like a monument to every lie and every truth they had ever shared. The story wasn't over. It was only shifting the battle, no longer outside, but within the fragile territory of trust in the heart. The storm had not stopped for 3 days. The city was soaked in gray skies and restless wind. Elena hadn't spoken to Adrian since that night, her heart torn between betrayal and the lingering echo of his love. She had returned to her small studio, the first place she had ever built with her own hands, hoping that silence could help her find clarity. But even in silence, she heard him the way he said her name, the way he had looked at her when he told her the truth. Each morning brought new headlines about the Moore investigation. Ryan's trial was approaching, and the prosecutors had requested her testimony. She avoided the calls at first. But when Grace arrived with tear-stained eyes, Elena knew she couldn't keep running. He's trying to shift the blame, Grace said, her voice shaking. Ryan is claiming he was set up by you and Adrian. If you don't testify, the court might believe him. Elena took a deep breath, staring out the window at the horizon, a tower that still pierced the clouds like a blade of light. Then I'll testify, she said quietly. I'm done letting anyone write my story. On the morning of the trial, the courthouse steps were lined with cameras. Flashes like lightning across her face. She walked past them calmly, wearing a simple navy dress, her hair tied back, her expression composed, but inside, her heart was trembling as she took her seat in the courtroom. She saw Ryan across the aisle, pale thinner than before, but his eyes still carried that same cruel spark beside him. His lawyer whispered strategies, but Ryan's gaze never left her. Then she saw Ryan in the gallery sitting silently, his face shadowed and unreadable. He hadn't tried to contact her since that night yet. Here he was. She felt a shiver of emotion run through her, as if part of her had been waiting for him all along. When the questioning began, Ryan's lawyer wasted no time turning the blame. He asked if she had known about Adrian's financial involvement, if she had been part of a conspiracy to destroy Ryan's empire. She answered calmly. No, I didn't know about Adrian's actions until after everything happened, but I do know this. She looked directly at Ryan. When you humiliate and manipulate people long enough, they stop being afraid of you. The courtroom fell silent, her voice steady and clear. I'm not here as a victim anymore. I'm here as a witness. As the trial continued, Adrian was called to testify. His presence electrified the room. He admitted his role in collecting evidence against Ryan, but denied fabricating anything. Every file, every document was real. He said everything I did was to expose the truth. Not to destroy anyone, Ryan's lawyer sneered. You mean not to destroy anyone except the man your lover once married? Adrian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Still, his eyes found Elena's across the room, and in that moment, the noise of the courtroom faded. She saw the exhaustion in him, the quiet remorse, the unspoken apology. When the verdict finally came, hours later, it hit like a storm. Ryan Moore guilty on all charges. The sound of the gavel echoed through the room like thunder. Ryan's face crumbled as officers moved to escort him away. His eyes found Elena one last time, filled with hate and disbelief, before he was taken out of sight. The crowd began to disperse, but Elena stayed seated, staring at the empty space where Ryan had stood. It was over, but the ending didn't feel like victory. It felt like release. When she finally stood and turned, Adrian was gone. That night, she returned to the Horizon Tower, now complete and waiting for its grand opening. The top floor overlooked the entire city, lights shimmering on wet streets below. She stood alone in the vast space, remembering everything that had happened, the betrayal, the pain, the unexpected love, the redemption she had almost found. A soft voice behind her broke the silence. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Adrian stood near the elevator, dressed in black, his expression unreadable. She didn't turn at first. "I wasn't sure you'd still care," she replied. "I never stopped," he said quietly. "I just didn't know if I had the right anymore." He walked closer, stopping a few steps behind her. "I bought back your mother's land because I wanted you to have something untouched by pain," he said, his voice low but steady. "I didn't tell you because I thought it would hurt less if you didn't know, but it hurt more, didn't it?" She turned to face him, her eyes full of tears. "You can't protect someone by lying to them, Adrian, not even out of love." "I know," he said softly, "and I've been trying to find a way to show you that." He opened his hand, revealing a small silver key. "What is that?" she asked. "It's for the house that now stands on your mother's land," he said. "It's yours. Every design, every detail came from your old sketches. I built it exactly as your mother planned." Before she passed, Elena covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You built her dream." He stepped closer. "No, we built it together, even if you didn't know it." She took the key from his hand, their fingers brushing electricity sparking between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. The storm outside had quieted the rain now, gentle against the glass. She whispered, "I don't know if I can forget everything that happened." He shook his head. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to let me walk beside you again. No lies, no walls, just truth." She looked into his eye, and saw no arrogance, no manipulation, just a man stripped of pride standing before her, not as a billionaire, but as someone who finally understood love. Slowly, she reached for him, her hand trembling as it touched his chest, his heart beating fast beneath her palm. "Maybe we both needed to break," she said softly. "Maybe that's how we finally learned to build something real." Adrian exhaled a breath that sounded like a prayer, and then he pulled her gently into his arms. The city lights glowed around them as if the world itself was exhaling too. Weeks later, at the opening of the Horizon Tower, Elena stood beside Adrian, smiling as children from the local community played in the garden below, laughter echoing off the glass walls. She had designed this place to be more than a monument. It was a symbol of healing, of second chances of love born from ruin, as the sun dipped below the skyline. Adrian turned to her, placing the compass in her palm, the needle steady and still. "You once said you couldn't find your direction," he whispered. "Now, you are my north." Elena smiled through tears. The same words she had once said, now carried a different meaning, not about loss, but about finding home. The wind swept gently across the rooftop, carrying away the last echoes of the past. They stood together, watching the horizon shimmer gold in the fading light, and for the first time in years, Elena felt no fear, no shadows, only peace and the quiet